Hi, I'm Stewart Spinks and welcome to episode 402 of my podcast, Beekeeping Short and Sweet. It won't have gone unnoticed that this week has been quite warm. The UK's hottest June day ever, a record set not so far away from me, and on that day I had to carry out several inspections. It felt like someone had thrown a bucket of hot water over me while I was wearing my bee suit. Beekeeping Short and Sweet, a beekeeping podcast for the inquisitive beekeeper with a short attention span. A beekeeper, in fact, just like me. Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast for this week, and oh my goodness, what a week! Record-breaking temperatures here in the UK, with the top temperature of 37.3 degrees Celsius just a few miles down the road in Suffolk. That's a crazy 99.14 degrees Fahrenheit. The hottest temperature ever recorded in June here in the UK. And I'm questioning my decision just last week here at home in choosing to replace our ageing central heating boiler instead of having some air conditioning units fitted. Ah well, I'm sure I'll be happy with that choice in a few months' time, but boy, it's been hot. The irony of it all is that the heating engineer had to commission our boiler system by turning on the central heating and getting all the radiators up to their highest temperature so he could take thermal images showing that it all works. Elsewhere at home, in my garden office, I've been unable to sit and work for more than 10 minutes or so. A quick check of emails and out again. I'm currently in the office with doors open wide with one of my fans running and a reasonably cool breeze with some light rain outside. It's 5 a.m. in the morning, this being Saturday, but it's due to get quite warm again later today, hence I'm out early to work on the podcast. Still, it's not as warm as inspecting bees wrapped up in a bee suit. Not that I'm advocating inspecting bees without a bee suit, of course. I know there are some beekeepers around the world that are able to do this, or foolhardy enough to try this, but with my bees, even the calm ones, I'm not taking the risk. Those stings still hurt. I was working at our fishing lakes apiaries. Several jobs needed to be completed, and because it was all part of the queen rearing process, it wasn't possible to delay the work. I'll come back to this work in a moment, but first, I thought you'd like to hear how I've been caught out this week by my bees over at the farm apiary. Well, probably not just this week. It would have been a week or so earlier. And, it still catches me out. They've swarmed. Several colonies, in fact. And that means no honey from those colonies this summer. When colonies swarm at this point in the year, you lose around half of the bees from the hive. It's just not possible, with the time left in the summer, for them to grow back to a large enough size to have any kind of foraging force. The best I can hope for from these bees now is that they requeen themselves successfully, put away enough stores to see them through the winter, and allow me to start again with them in the spring next year. It left me scratching my head a little bit. Why had so many of them swarmed? Could it be a knock-on effect of the genetics in these colonies? Was it the weather, or some other reason? If you've been listening to the podcasts regularly or watching the videos, or both in fact, you'll remember, maybe, that I mentioned something of a surprising June gap over at the farm apiary. And I think this may be the cause of the sudden rise in swarming. I don't have a huge number of hives these days, maybe 50 in all apiaries. We do have a large number of nukes that are growing rapidly, so that's keeping me busy too. But for honey production, numbers are not as high as they have been in the past. We had moved several colonies out of the farm apiary, so numbers here had been reduced, maybe only 15 hives at this site now. So why the swarming in so many of them? It could be genetics. These all had queens or offspring from queens that we sourced from the same place. But my suspicion is that it was down to the June gap for some reason. These colonies had space, supers were in place for any further nectar flow, brood boxes were not full of food stores, so restrictions on the queen laying her eggs were at a minimum, really. It is a bit of a conundrum, it is definitely a frustration, but in the big scheme of things, it's not going to cause me too much of an issue. These colonies are now out of the picture for honey production this year, so I can use them elsewhere. The best use of this resource for me is to make up nukes to take any queen cells that we are able to produce. We have a range of options open to us. This is why beekeeping for me is so much fun. There isn't a one-size-fits-all process that has to be followed. You've got to do it this way or you're doing it wrong. Sure, there are set timelines that we simply can't ignore, but for queen rearing there are so many options regarding mating nukes, and these now queenless colonies can really help out. For me, the mini mating nukes simply need too much time and effort, which I don't really have. A far better option is to use 2, 3 or 4 frame nukes. 2 frame nukes are put into nuke boxes that divide, such as the BS Honeybees nukes. With the divider in place, I can add 2 frames loaded with bees, food and brood, and top them off with a frame of foundation. If I have enough frames of bees, food and brood, I can make this up to 3 frames and forego the need for a frame of foundation. And finally, the 4 frame nuke is the honey pour nuke box. This doesn't have any divider, so necessarily needs 4 frames, but again I can use 2, 3 or 4 frames of bees, food and brood and add foundation where necessary depending on what I have available. I have mentioned the mini mating nukes, and you know what, we will use them despite my comments a moment ago. We need to raise a large number of queens right now, and this will take every last bit of equipment that I have to house the queenless colonies. I don't have many of these mini mating nukes, maybe a dozen or so hopefully I can cope with those. Another reason for my preference of using full-size frames in nuke boxes for queen rearing is that once I have a queen cell in there, I can comfortably leave them alone for several weeks. I do of course pop back to check in on the queen emergence and again maybe a week or so later to check for successful mating, but then I can let them carry on about their business with not too much additional work. They have space for the queen to lay eggs and can build nicely into a strong, small colony, hopefully in time for any challenges with wasps and the like. No doubt from late July and early August. Is it going to be a bad year for wasps, do you think? I have already seen a small number of wasps around the apiaries, so do plan for this later in the summer. With the wasps in the back of my mind for now, I need to check in on the Nico cage, probably on Sunday morning, actually, while you're listening to this podcast maybe. So far, I've managed the timeline to the point that I removed the queen cage plug from the Nico cage to allow the queen out. She appears to have laid eggs in a number of cells, maybe 30 or 40, maybe all of them. I can't be sure, to be honest. I think I may need a magnifier or something. Or it may simply have been that I couldn't see the eggs for the sweat in my eyes. It was hot. Anyway, she might just have laid eggs in every one of the cells for all I could see, so we'll prepare for the best and see how things go. In the worst case scenario, I could always cut out some strips from other frames in that nuke box and make up an alley frame or 2. But where are all these young larvae going to go? My target number for any queen cell starter colony, such as our cloakboard colony, is 20. I could possibly stretch that to 30 if they're strong enough, I guess, but that could be counterproductive in that the queen cells all get less provisioning, and as a result, when the time comes for virgin queens to emerge, they may be on the small side and possibly don't succeed during mating flights and the like. It's a very real risk, so I'm not going to take it. Well, probably not. If, and it's a big if, our Nico queen cell cups have lots of eggs and these successfully develop into young larvae, if I get maybe 40 or 50 potential queen cells, I'm going to need somewhere to put them. This I've already considered and have made contingency for a positive outcome. Well, I'm nothing if not optimistic. Alongside the cloak board, I've set up a double nuke box. This kind of setup is sometimes known as a swarm box or starter colony. Starter colonies are strong enough to produce queen cells, but can often be too weak to go on to finish a queen cell. And other stronger colonies are used to finish off the work. The same can be said of the swarm box. But my double nuke box setup should allow for the full process, starter and finisher processes to work. At least that's my hope. What I've done, and I'll head back and check to see that it's all worked before using it, is taken a very strong queen-right nuke and removed the queen. She's now safely in another nuke box elsewhere in the apiary, probably wondering where the heck all of her workers have disappeared to. She is now in a 2-frame nuke with added frames of foundation to effectively start over again. The remaining frames of brood and food from her original nuke box are still in the same nuke box on the same stand in the same position within the apiary. I next opened up several other nukes. Honestly, these nukes are very strong and have really benefited from a strong nectar flow and good weather this year. These nukes were then checked for good health. As ever, always check for good health. And a frame or two of sealed brood was taken from them, and I replaced those frames with foundation. This not only gives me a supply of sealed brood, but also reduces the strength of the nukes in taking away brood that would be on the verge of emerging and overwhelming the nuke box. 2 of the frames of sealed brood went into the original, now queenless nuke. I then added an additional nuke box body. This makes it a 12-frame double-stacked nuke box. To this, I continued to add frames of sealed brood from other strong nukes in the apiary until I had a full 6 frames of sealed brood in the top box. Just to further explain, these frames of sealed brood also had food stores and some small amount of open brood, but what I was particularly keen to avoid was frames of eggs and young larvae, although, to be honest, there were a couple of frames that had this. The reason for selecting sealed brood is fairly straightforward. Sealed brood requires no help from the worker nurse bees, and they generate a certain amount of their own body heat, so having to keep them warm isn't a problem. Somewhat ironic at the moment, I think. So, the swarm box, as I'll call it for now, is set up, but will have queen cells in it. In another ironic twist, I need to remove these in order to produce more queen cells. Why not use these queen cells? Well, I'm not sure we'll get the right genetic recombination and could end up with some grumpy bees, and I really don't want that. I'd rather delay a week and use larvae from my chosen donor colony. Here, I need to go back in and remove all of those queen cells, and it must be every last one of them. Again, I'll be in the apiary doing this while you're having your breakfast or brunch and listening to the podcast. Once these queen cells are removed, I can add my Nico cell cups, and that's another 20 or 30 potential queen cells. Well, fingers crossed. This maybe gives me upwards of 40 or 50 queen cells that I might just have in about 10 days' time, and that means I need to get those mating nukes ready too. Of course, there's no guarantee that any of this will happen, such is the way of beekeeping. The eggs in the Nico cage may not be as many as I think. The bees may simply ignore them and they die. So, it's a case of don't count your chickens, but make sure we're ready, just in case. Lastly today, the summer nectar flow is here. The tap is well and truly turned on, and our colonies are really enjoying filling up every space possible with honey stores. That, of course, means we need to be ready with supers or whatever boxes we're using to add more space to our full-size colonies and nukes. The trick with the summer nectar flow is timing. Isn't that beekeeping in one word? Everything we do is about the timing. Get it right and beekeeping is a joy. Get it wrong and, well, things can go sideways very quickly. Specifically thinking about summer honey, I don't like to add too many supers all at once. There are, as ever with beekeeping, exceptions. Borage being one of those. Here, I would pile on as many supers as I think the bees need. 2, 3, 4, or even 5 in one go. But back home, in our static apiaries, things are a little less frantic. It's still busy, don't get me wrong, and there's a lot of nectar coming in, but the bees generally have to go further afield to collect, and so there isn't quite the flood of nectar coming in. If I have drawn comb in my supers, I might add 2 on a strong colony from the start. Actually, if you haven't suffered a June gap, you'll probably already have a residual spring super on your hives. I like to add supers with foundation to the strongest colonies. They draw out the comb so quickly and evenly, whereas weaker colonies seem to really struggle to produce enough wax and so chew into the foundation, and this can sometimes spoil it. The trick here is to make sure that as we approach the latter part of the summer nectar flow, there aren't too many frames with half-filled or empty cells, or maybe even frames of foundation still. If I get to that point, I always shuffle frames around in supers and reduce down the number of super frames I have on a colony, forcing the bees to fill every last cell. And of course, I'm watching closely. Maybe they'll find a late summer nectar source and fill that super quickly. At that point, I'll want to add another super, but of drawn comb. It's too late in the season here to be waiting on foundation to be drawn. And then, of course, it's time to enjoy the success of a hard-working summer season for both beekeeper and bees. Still, we have some time to go before we get to that point. Good luck with your summer nectar flow, and I'll catch up with you all again next week. Well, that's it for this week. For all of you who haven't yet signed up to my Patreon page, I, together with Steph, have been creating beekeeping content for many years now. And if you're looking for some straightforward, down-to-earth tips and techniques, help and advice, then do take a look at my Patreon page. We have over 1,700 individual beekeeping posts, videos and podcasts filled with useful and timely help and advice. My approach is pragmatic and calm, sometimes entertaining, but always with help and support for the beekeepers at the heart of what I do. I keep my videos short and concise wherever possible, no waffle, no flannel, just honest beekeeping advice from years of keeping bees. Take a look and join me for the new 2026 beekeeping season. It'll cost you less than a jar of honey, and you never know, there may be something there that will help improve your beekeeping. Check us out online at www.patreon.com/Norfolk Honey.